The fluorescent lights of the dojo hummed a monotonous, sterile drone, a sound that had become the backdrop to James Washington's life. They were the cold, impartial moons to his solitary, nocturnal world. For 3 weeks, he had been the ghost of the Golden Fist Martial Arts Academy, materializing only after the shouts of Kiai had faded and the last of the students, buzzing with adrenaline and ambition, had departed. He was 42 years old, and his job was to erase the day's efforts. The sweat, the occasional drop of blood, the chalky footprints, leaving the sprawling white mat a pristine, unwritten page for the next day's story. Tonight, the story had run long. The advanced class, a knot of 8 dedicated students, was still on the mat, and James's world of quiet ritual had collided with the one he had spent 2 decades fleeing. He moved with a slow, rhythmic grace, the mop handle an extension of his arm, a dance of cleansing he had perfected. "Hey, you, the one with the mop!" The voice was a shard of glass in the quiet hum, sharp and glittering with arrogance. It belonged to Derek Mitchell, a man who wore his black belt not just around his waist but as his entire personality. He stood in the center of the mat, a smug emperor surveying his small kingdom, his feet planted wide as if to claim the very ground beneath them. "How about a little demonstration for my students?" Derek's voice boomed, each word a performance. "I want to show them the vast, unbridgeable chasm between a warrior and, well, a janitor." A few of the students offered tinny, uncomfortable snickers. Most, however, shifted their weight, suddenly finding the ceiling tiles or their own shoelaces fascinating. James let the mop rest against the wall. He looked up, his movements unhurried, his face a placid mask that betrayed none of the ghosts the words had stirred. "No need to trouble yourself, Sensei," James replied, his voice a low, calm rumble that seemed to absorb the tension in the room. "I'm just about done here. I'll be out of your way." He turned his attention back to a stubborn scuff mark on the floor, his focus absolute, a silent dismissal. Derek's laugh was a loud, braying thing, full of forced mirth that echoed unnaturally in the cavernous space. "Hear that, everyone? The man's scared to even look at the mat." He strode towards James, his bare feet slapping the mat in an aggressive rhythm, a predator closing in. "Come on, old man. Don't you want to show these kids what a real fight looks like?" "Oh, wait," he paused, milking the moment. "I bet you've never even been in a real fight in your life, have you?" The question was a poisoned dart, and it found its mark in a place deep within James, a place sealed off for 20 years. 20 years of running, 20 years of silencing the phantom roar of the crowd, the blinding flash of the ring lights, the sickening thud that had shattered his world. A secret kept even from his own daughter, who knew only the gentle, quiet man who worked odd jobs and never, ever raised his voice. "Just a quick educational demonstration," Derek pressed, his smile a predatory slash as he invaded James's personal space. "I bet you can't even form a proper guard. Let's show my students why there's a hierarchy, why some people train to conquer and others just clean up the mess." A flicker, a dormant muscle in James's chest, long atrophied, twitched with a phantom memory. His eyes, deep and patient, met Derek's. For a single charged nanosecond, something ancient and formidable passed between them, a silent current that made the self-assured sensei take an involuntary half-step back. The very air seemed to crackle. Recovering his swagger, Derek tried to mask the tremor of uncertainty in his voice. "Just for the beginners, you understand. To show them the importance of respecting the art." Slowly, deliberately, James placed his mop and bucket to the side. He stood to his full height, the simple action imbued with a fluid, startling grace that was utterly incongruous with his role. The students fell silent, their attention drawn to the unfolding drama. A young woman with her hair in a tight bun, Sarah Chun, exchanged a worried glance with her training partner, who shook his head in disgust. "All right," James said at last, his voice the calm surface of a deep lake before a storm. "But on one condition. When this is over, you will stand in that same spot, and you will apologize to every one of your students for degrading this dojo into a cheap circus." Derek's laugh was strained now, a brittle thing. "Apologize? Buddy, the only one apologizing will be you to the floor when I introduce you to it." What no one in that room could possibly comprehend was that they were not looking at a janitor. They were standing in the presence of James Silent Storm Washington, the five-time undefeated world mixed martial arts champion, a living legend who had vanished from the face of the earth 2 decades prior. He had retired at the absolute zenith of his career, haunted by the accident that had claimed his best friend, his brother in arms, and had sworn a solemn vow to never raise his fists in combat again. But some vows, when tested against the raw steel of a man's dignity, are destined to be broken. "Gather round, everyone," Derek commanded, adjusting his belt with a flourish, soaking in the attention. "You are about to witness a practical lesson in social order." He gestured grandly towards James. "Here we have a perfect specimen of someone who has failed to grasp that there are designated spaces for certain kinds of people. An elite martial arts academy is not the place for, well, you understand." The thinly veiled racism hung in the air, acrid and suffocating. It was the same poison James had been force-fed 2 decades ago. The whispers from the cheap seats in the locker rooms about fighters who didn't fit the champion's mold. But the James of 42 was not the hot-headed youth of 20. He had learned the hard alchemy of turning raw rage into a cold, focused energy, something far more potent than a simple punch. "Sensei Derek?" A voice cut through the tension. It was Sarah Chun. Unbeknownst to Derek, she was not just a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. She was a master's student in sports psychology, writing her thesis on discrimination and microaggressions in athletic environments. "Perhaps we could just continue with our regular training? It's getting rather late." Derek rounded on her. "And Sarah Chun, are you now questioning my pedagogical methods?" He snapped, using her full name as a tool of intimidation. "Sit down and watch. You will learn more about the reality of power in the next 5 minutes than in a month of your KTAS." James saw the fear in Sarah's eyes, but also a spark of defiance that reminded him of his younger sister, Keisha. Fearless, brilliant Keisha, killed at 17 by a stray bullet in a police shootout. He had been in Japan, chasing glory when he got the news. Another soul he loved, lost while he was a world away. It was the final straw that had led to his disappearance. The defiance in Sarah's eyes also reminded him of the ghost that never slept, Tony the Hammer Rodriguez, his best friend, his sparring partner. Dead because of him. A flurry of punches thrown with too much force, fueled by the racist taunts of the crowd a few nights prior. Tony had gone down, his head striking the canvas at a fatal angle. An accident, the inquiry ruled. But James knew the truth. He had lost control. "So, Janitor," Derek sneered, circling him like a hyena. "Ready to show us your famous mop-pushing guard?" It was then that Derek made his critical error. He punctuated the insult with a light shove to James's shoulder, a casual act of disrespect. The push landed, and nothing happened. James didn't move an inch. It was like shoving a granite statue. Derek felt a jolt run up his arm, his smug smile faltering like a faulty bulb. "Interesting," James murmured, his voice a whisper that carried across the silent gym. "It's been a long time since anyone has been that foolish." The atmosphere shifted. It wasn't anger in his voice, it was the unshakable calm of a man who had stared into the abyss and was not impressed by the shadows. "Last chance, Janitor," Derek blustered, his voice tight with irritation. "Accept the demonstration, or I'll have security throw you out. And you can kiss your little job goodbye." James opened his eyes, and the dragon that Derek had mistaken for a lizard finally awoke. The sensei felt a primal fear snake up his spine. "All right," James said, his voice imbued with an authority that commanded instant silence. "But before we begin, I want you to look at Sarah Chun. I want you to apologize for attempting to silence her. Then I want you to apologize to the rest of your students for turning this dojo into a stage for your own pathetic ego." And then James smiled. It was not a smile of submission, but a slow, confident smile that spread across his face like the dawn. The smile of a man who had just found a cause worthy of breaking a 20-year vow. "You dare lecture me?" Derek roared, his face crimson. He dropped into his fighting stance. "I will teach you respect." James took a single step forward, and in that instant, his entire being transformed. His shoulders settled, his center of gravity dropped, and his feet shifted into a stance of such perfect balance, it was a work of art. the mark of a true master. From the side, Sarah Chun's eyes widened. She had studied videos of the great masters for her research, and here it was, live. The economy of movement, the serene breathing, the aura of contained power. It was like watching a historical documentary come to life. Her fingers, acting on instinct, finished a search on her phone. Las Vegas National Gym. The results sent a wave of ice through her veins. It was the legendary training ground for the world's most elite MMA champions. Pride, that most blinding of follies, made Derek's choice for him. He attacked. His first punch was a technically flawless jab, a punch that would have connected with 99% of opponents. But James Washington was the 1%. He swayed to the side like a reed in the wind, and Derek's fist sliced through empty air. Clean technique, James observed, already repositioned. But you telegraphed the move with your right shoulder, a critical tell. Derek spun, bewildered, and launched his signature combination, a rapid-fire jab straight hook. Again, it was like striking a phantom. James ducked, leaned, and stepped back, each movement a masterpiece of precision, causing the flurry of punches to meet only empty air. An interesting combination, James said, his breathing still perfectly even. Effective against a static target, but you leave your entire left side catastrophically exposed after the hook. Sweat beaded on Derek's brow as panic frayed his composure. "Stand still and fight!" he bellowed, launching a final desperate flurry. James flowed through the storm, untouched, and then, in the blink of an eye, the distance between them collapsed. One moment Derek was flailing at air, the next James was standing directly in front of him. "You want to know the difference, Derek?" James asked softly. "The difference between a gym fighter and a professional champion?" Before Derek could process the question, James acted. With no wind-up, no overt display of force, he simply placed the palm of his right hand on Derek's chest. And Derek flew. It wasn't a push. It was a propulsion. He was launched backwards as if struck by a cannonball, his feet leaving the mat entirely, landing flat on his back with a resounding thud that echoed the finality of his defeat. The silence in the gym was absolute. Sarah Chun finally let out the breath she had been holding, having witnessed a perfect, devastating, and yet controlled application of power. It was not brutality, it was art. James walked over and extended a hand to the fallen instructor. "It's quite simple, really," he said calmly. "Leverage, timing, and the transfer of kinetic energy. Principles I honed over a 22-year professional career." Derek ignored the hand, staggering to his feet. 22-year career in what?" he rasped. It was Sarah who answered, her voice trembling slightly as she held up her phone. "You really don't know who this is, do you?" She read from the screen, her voice gaining strength. James Washington, also known as Silent Storm, 5-time undefeated world mixed martial arts champion, retired at age 29 after a tragic accident in training resulted in the death of his sparring partner. The words detonated in the room. Derek's face went white as the colossal, humiliating truth crashed down upon him. He had publicly taunted a living icon of the very art he claimed to master. 5-time world champion? Derek stammered, his arrogance dissolving. James nodded. "I retired a long time ago. Needed a simple life. No cameras, no fame. No need to prove anything to anyone." The transformation in Derek was stark. The bully was gone, replaced by a man crushed by his own monumental ignorance. I had no idea," he whispered. "If you had known," James interrupted, his voice gentle but firm, "you would have treated me with respect. But what about the next janitor? The next person you deem to be beneath you?" The question was a blow more damaging than any physical strike. Derek looked at his students, saw their disappointment, and felt the respect he craved evaporate. "James," he said, his voice thick with a humility no one had ever heard from him before. "I am truly sorry, to you, to Sarah, to everyone. There is no excuse for my actions." 3 months later, the dojo was a different place. A discreetly filmed video of the incident had gone viral, torching Derek's reputation. He lost most of his students and was now teaching a small class at a community center, a man humbled by public disgrace. At the Golden Fist, now under new ownership, Sensei James had become a permanent fixture, hired at Sarah's urging. He taught not just technique, but the philosophy of respect and humility that had been absent for so long. The greatest lesson, James would often tell his new students, is to never judge a book by its cover. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. True strength is not in the power of your fists, but in the character of your heart. Justice, he had learned, sometimes moves in silence, a quiet storm that reshapes the landscape without a single clap of thunder.